Hello, viewers of Spell, and welcome to this part 1 of If Midoriya Was a Sorcerer from D&D. Recording this part to give some clarification, since it had taken a while for me to edit this episode thanks to just being really tired lately. The second thing I would like to add is the 3 what ifs I'm thinking about doing myself on the channel in the future. Which are, what if Midoriya had a symbiote? This would be similar to Venom, but a little different, having some of my own unique symbiote ideas. With Midoriya gaining it fairly early, and not realizing what he had bonded with thanks to a couple other events. I think that will be an interesting one, along with what if Midoriya was an isekai survivor? Which basically I combine some aspects from Sword Art Online, some other isekai, Log Horizon, and have it to where Midoriya had been isekai'd, had returned, but with powers from the world he was isekai'd to, and the worlds would slowly converge. Similar to what I was thinking for the D&D sorcerer. Similar ideas, different concept. And then the last one was, what if Midoriya was a member of Fairy Tail? This one would be somewhat similar. If he had a secret quirk he would awaken that would allow him to travel to Fairy Tail. He would awaken this in his early age, but unfortunately none of his abilities would cross over from Fairy Tail. This would be a different concept, mostly because instead of just having him be involved in both, thanks to a series of events, including his quirk, basically tearing holes in between the barrier between the worlds, sometime after the sports festival, the worlds would literally merge together, resulting in Fairy Tail characters crossing over with my hero freely, and Midoriya having to try to figure out how to explain the reasoning on why he knows all these people, and why he accidentally merged 2 different planets. But I think I've done enough rambling. Without further ado, let's get into what if Deku was a Dungeons & Dragons sorcerer. Also, I realize I've been on a fantasy binge. Midoriya was surprised that his dad asked this man to help train him. Ragnar definitely didn't seem like an intellectual person. But it was only a few days later that Midoriya realized what his dad meant. Since being a hero required you to have certain physical attributes, as Ragnar began working with Midoriya to help build muscle. Though Ragnar said he was looking for a good place to train him. We had flashed to a couple days later with Midoriya in class, as the teacher threw career application tests into the air, just exclaiming, "We all know you're gonna at least try the hero track." Midoriya thought that the teacher wasn't exactly being that responsible. After all, there was no way everyone in this class would be able to even qualify to take a hero test, as Bakugo actually voiced this in the most untactful way possible. Bakugo would get on his desk and say, "Come on, Teach, we all know that these extras would be lucky to become the sidekick of some D-lister." As this wound up kicking up a lot of angry comments from the class. As Midoriya started questioning if he should do something, Bakugo then said, "After all, me and the sorcerer are the only ones who are going to be qualifying for UA." As Midoriya mentally facepalmed, Bakugo had dragged him into this. As Bakugo went to boast some more, Midoriya would make some gestures with his hands, as Bakugo suddenly found that he couldn't open up his mouth. as Bakugo would glare at Midoriya. Midoriya holding his hand in the position you would expect someone to hold over someone's mouth. Bakugo quickly jumped at Midoriya, as all you could hear was, "Let go of my mouth! You!" As the teacher said, "You two! Knock it off or you're gonna go to the principal." As Midoriya released Bakugo's mouth, as he said, "Don't you think about doing that again with, what, your mage hand?" Midoriya shrugged. He had found it rather useful. As the day would go normally, as like in canon, he would be attacked by a sledge villain. He wasn't able to put up a defense, with the sledge quickly filling his mouth and restraining his arms. This resulted in Midoriya not being able to really cast anything, as All Might would save him. Though this time, Midoriya would ask for an autograph and simply asked, "Can someone become a hero with a almost magical quirk?" All Might would just laugh and say, "Bizarre for someone to call their quirk magical." Midoriya would simply get the autograph and not ask All Might any major questions. The next day, he would show it off to Bakugo, with Bakugo being impressed, though also teasing Midoriya for not being able to get out of the sludge villain's grasps. As we would flash to a couple days later, as Ragnar asked Midoriya and Bakugo, as he would say in a thick accent, "I think I found the perfect training ground for you," as he gestured with his arms. It was Dagobah Beach. The currents had resulted in a lot of trash arriving at the beach, and people began dumping, turning what was once a beautiful beach into a beachside trash dump. As the man said, "You'll train your muscles by moving the trash. And since almost no one actually checks on this place or really cares what's destroyed, you can unleash your attacks to their fullest. And as long as you don't make too much noise or too much of a spectacle, no one will necessarily care." The two boys looked at each other, interested in the challenge. Both boys would spend the next several months moving trash. Picking up different sized bits of trash allowed them to work different muscles. This wouldn't get them jacked into the traditional sense, but it would allow them to have an overall decent muscle buildup. As Ragnar would also ask Midoriya's mother to start cooking some different meals. Meals much higher in protein. As Ragnar would actually take an interest in Bakugo's anger. As Ragnar would bring Bakugo to his side one of the days of their training and said, "I see you have much anger. I'll help train you to hone it. I also had a temper when I was young, and the fathers and elders of my village helped me to hone it." Bakugo would shrug the help, but thinking it was something akin to counseling. After Ragnar had brought him aside a couple more times, Bakugo finally relented, being pleasantly surprised that it was actually how to direct your anger at your opponent. As we would approach the day of the UA entrance exam, Bakugo and Izuku had separated training 2 months ago to work on their own individual skills without the other seeing. Midoriya had broken through a fairly substantial wall when it came to his magic, being able to cast more powerful magic now, along with Ragnar teaching him how to actually use a sword. Ragnar said he didn't think Midoriya would ever substantially use it, but he had seen heroes with swords and other physical weapons before. And in Ragnar's own words, "If you do not train in an art, you will need it." Midoriya had chuckled and asked, Did that advice ever come in handy for him? As he said, "Yes, and it was your father who got me out of the situation." Midoriya, being intrigued, would ask, "What issue was that?" Ragnar would laugh, a deep, bellowing laugh. It was actually math and reading. Midoriya looked at him puzzled as he just said, "I had gotten into some trouble with a contract with a merchant. He had been swindling me and my entire village until your father came along and just casually mentioned that we were selling him more products than the contract said we had to. It saved us a lot of work." As Midoriya asked, "What happened to the merchant?" Ragnar would laugh and say, "Well, before pausing, clearly thinking for a second, and said, "I'll tell you when you're older." As Midoriya would prepare for the UA entrance exams, he would also do more reading, mastering more magic. He had written an entire new journal on the subject, piling it with his hero notebooks. You would look to see almost 10 full tomes of Midoriya's experiments with magic. As Midoriya would go to the exam, he would be a little nervous and trip. He would be saved by a brunette-haired girl. Midoriya would get up and thank her as she walked off. As Midoriya thought for an extra second, he would just hear someone say, "I see you are starting to think like a man." Midoriya, with a slight blush on his face, would turn around and see Ragnar. Midoriya would turn his head and ask, "What are you doing here?" UA's offering parents the ability to watch their child's exam. Midoriya said, "But you're not a parent." "Yes, but your mother asked me to take a look and see how you were doing." Midoriya thought that would be something his mother would ask him to do, as Ragnar would walk towards a building with signs saying "Visitors Observation." Midoriya would go in as President Mike would give the presentation, introducing the monsters. A kid with glasses would stand up and call Midoriya out for his muttering. Midoriya would be a little frustrated at this, mostly because though Midoriya had been muttering, he didn't think he was being that distracting, especially since the boy was, frankly, pretty far away. He would understand if it was a complaint from someone right next to him. But that student was, was several rows away, and as President Mike would say, "Oh, you're talking about the 0-pointer. That's an obstacle." Midoriya would put his hand to his chin and think that there was probably something more. After all, if it was a challenge, you wouldn't forget to mention it. Midoriya would rush in. As he rushed in, he saw the brunette-haired girl being a little nervous, as he would just give her a thumbs up. As the exam would begin, he would be casting fire bolts and many other spells, chromatic orb, chaos orb. Though both of those took a good bit of power. The spells would tear through the robots. He would also assist people who had gotten over their heads. But then he would hear something rumbling. The 0-pointer would arrive. It was huge. Midoriya started to think, even for a challenge, that's a bit much. As he would prepare to fall back and try to hunt some more robots, he would hear a voice. He would turn over and see, he would look and see the brunette-haired girl from before under collapsed rubble. He would rush forward, happy for Ragnar's strength training, as he would be able to push the rubble off of her and lead her away. The test would end, and Midoriya would get the girl's name, Ochako. Midoriya was fairly confident he had managed to beat the exams. He had prepared so much for the written, and he was pretty sure he had done enough to get through the combat, though he had lost track. What he had noticed, though, was that a lot of bizarre events were occurring. He hadn't had time to think about it during his training, but things like auroras appearing in places that you wouldn't expect them to, like South America. The auroras even made odd shapes, even for an aurora. Some looked like hands working, while others looked like faces. He had also noticed that he felt his power differ. Instead of just drawing on the power deep within him, he could draw power from around him. He was a little confused. He could feel the power and the world around him, and he could tell something was changing. And I think that's where we're going to leave it. I do intend on speeding up some of the events so we get to, say, the USJ fairly fast and beyond, because, frankly, that's where I have some more interesting stuff. And without further ado, please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy this content. This will be Spellry, signing off. I hope you have a good day.